gun control for us is a fantasy. In a way that like people say, well, you're being unrealistic about printing a gun. I think it's more unrealistic now, especially going forward, to think you could ever control this technology.
Cody R. Wilson, a 25-year-old graduate student and self-described crypto-anarchist. Cody is trying to put an end to the gun control debate with 3D printing. As one of the key figures in the wiki weapon movement, his goal is to produce and publish a file for a completely 3D printed firearm, one that anyone can download and then create with the right tools.
This is the frustration that a lot of these politicians are now encountering. They would like to regulate 3D printing of guns, except the problem is they want to regulate the technology first as just a general technology, and they're like, oh right, that would be tyrannical, and so they're not finding a neat way of doing it. It's like saying I can take my computer and I can create a certain kind of like verboten object, and then a politician saying, you know, we really ought to regulate how people use their computers. That's pretty tough to do in the end.
The narrative of the liberator is the excuse to take you into these places of anti-state thought, if you will. But even that is to like make it a little dry. It's just a somewhat, like you said in the beginning, what is it to have to think 3D printed gun, or what is it to have to think something contrary to what is deemed to be official knowledge, or the official course of things? Where do you have to go? What is the moral trajectory required? What happens to you, and what do you give up?
As I listen to your visionary stuff, I can't help looking at comments from Yevgeny Morozov, one of the leading sort of analysts of the internet and how it's impacting the world, who talks about two clear phenomena amongst people like yourself who spend all of your time thinking about an internet future. He talks about cyber utopianism and internet centrism, the idea that some, as he puts it, unidentified logic of the internet will reshape every environment it penetrates. He says so often it's actually going to be the other way around.
I think actually I'm more suspicious of the future that everyone's talking about. But I reverse this a lot. I say, like, no, the utopia, the real utopia, is right now. Is thinking that like there could be some kind of, these secular assertions about like the state of technology. Like, no, after I do the 3D printing thing, these New York congressmen come out and say like, no, we're going to freeze the state of gun technology to where critical pieces of guns will always be made of metal. Or like, we're going to return to 1994, we're going to do background checks, and everyone's going to have a serial number on their gun. I mean, the entire organization in framing of the situation suggests the opposite. The utopia is now.
Is the society ready for the liberation you're bringing it to? I mean, don't you, maybe you're a bit ahead of your times, don't you think? Because I'm thinking like regular folks are for the most part uneasy about the possibility of anyone making a deadly weapon at home. Do you know what I mean?
I think most people are apolitical, and their opinions aren't even worth counseling, I mean, and in fact, like, it's not consequential whether they're comfortable or uncomfortable with what certain people, certain activists do. I mean, most people just abide. So we're interested in pushing at the margins of technology, at the margins of politics, in this environment that we believe is somewhat post-political. The United States, as like as a warfare surveillance state, has an oppressively strong Cold War era regulatory export apparatus, among other things. It wants to manage the internet. It wants to spy on every government. It wants to, have every partner in the world bend a knee. And we believe, that's not the only role, that's not the only player in society. There are other ways to do political projects.
There's this Fukuyamist idea that like history had ended after the Cold War, right? And that like if we could just tweak neoliberal democracy, everything's going to be fine forever. That like somehow this is like the final political form. I mean, this is ridiculous. And you can see it. There's no evidence of a political program anymore in the world. In America, there aren't genuine politics. There's the media telling you Barack Obama versus Mitt Romney is like the epic clash of ideology, when we both know they're globalist neoliberals. I mean, they both exist to preserve like the interest of this relatively autonomous class of Goldman Sachs bankers.
Progressives are conservatives, all right? Remember, progressives are conservatives. They are social and economic conservatives. They believe in a status quo ante. So they have an ideal utopia which has already passed, and they are trying to return to. They are reactionaries. Anti-revolutionary reactionaries. Remember, everyone has a sense of it now, right? The Ellen DeGeneres model of the world, right? Everything's great, everything's happy, we're going to dance, we're all going to get along, everything's going to be fine, progress is perfect and unending and forever, and technology and the moral force of technology and progress are good, and we're all going to be good, and good things are going to happen to us all because we're all good. It's like hell. all right, thinking people know that it is hell, and it is like a hell of enforced positivity, where no criticism, negativity, or anything like it can be introduced that questions or, alterity.
Early on you say, I believe the printed pistol lays bare Western ethical ideology. What is that ideology in your view, and how does the pistol reveal that?
So I'm specifically referencing, in the sense of Badiou ethical ideology, that there's a undergirding moral force in our politics that's just kind of assigned or assumed without question. This is often the ethical ideology of progress, that technological progress is good, that it has a good moral force, and that we do good things when we contribute to technology enabling the democratic. All these assumptions are incorrect. When people say, we'll be on the right side of history, or they kind of expect or play along with this idea that technology has a progressive force with history and everything is leading towards some type of cohesive whole, this integrationist idea that history is eventually moving toward, we're all getting smarter, we're all getting better, everything's getting better, politics is getting not as conflicted. Politics now is about totally eradicating the forces of difference and antagonism, and indeed, I would argue, the essence of politics itself. We are striving toward, in our moral progressivism, our ethical ideology, we are striving toward an age where politics is kind of after the fact, a post-political era where, look, what we're not, Hillary Clinton's arguing, look, borders, whatever, culture, whatever. Those are just points of conflict. We're a part of a global integrationist whole. We are stronger together, all right? This is her Hegelian unionism.
Yeah.
And I would argue that has a certain bankrupt moral force that is just assumed to be dominant, but really can't drive people, isn't interesting. So I stand against these ideas.
What on earth is the public good of wanting the widest distribution possible of implements of violence?
So I don't define it in terms of the public good, right? In fact, I guess the very lead of our project is questioning this idea of a kind of consensual universal claim to a public good, that there's a certain kind of moralistic hegemony, the human rights pacifistic kind of paradigm, which is kind of foisted upon us. It's used to kind of like reinforce a certain structure of domination.
Mr. Horowitz says, insurrectionists, that's you and me, anyone that believes that we should have access to arms, publicly, civilly, not even as a justification to, shoot anybody. Insurrectionists confuse their anti-democratic sentiments with legitimate revolution, all right? Legitimate revolution, remember that here. They cast themselves as putative leaders in a modern-day revolt on behalf of people to restore democracy and freedom. As we describe later in this book, and I wouldn't recommend the book. It will make you mad. Revolution is not sanctioned by the Constitution. It does not enjoy legal protection as an individual right and should be avoided unless there is a complete breakdown in democratic institutions of government. Two things there. Revolution is not protected by the Constitution. It's this regulationist idea, right? I'm reminded of the Chinese who wanted to recently, I think it was this year, regulate the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. It's just the idea that the life sphere itself can be regulated at some absurd point. So, this is policy for revolution. Well, okay, step B, revolution. You know what I'm saying? You can't write revolution into the legal code. It's absurd. There is a substantialization of democratic general will. What does that mean? Horowitz writes, revolution is illegal. No minority has the right to proceed to it. It can only happen after a complete breakdown, in his words, a complete breakdown of democratic institutions. So you see, you and I, we're encapsulated in the social contract. We are trapped in the social contract. There is no legitimate way to proceed to revolution. We must wait for this inevitable historical breakdown, all right? Well, why can't we vote revolution? Well, it's illegitimate. So here's Rousseau, right? Right from Rousseau. This is from the Social Contract, Book 2. The citizen gives his consent to all laws, including those which are passed in spite of his opposition, and even those which punish him when he dares to break any of them. The constant will of all the members of the state is the general will. Okay? By virtue of the general will, they are citizens and free. When in the popular assembly a law is proposed, what the people are asked to do is not exactly determine whether they approve or reject the proposal. Think Obamacare, think NDAA, right? Congress isn't being asked to approve or reject Obamacare, okay? They're being asked, each man, to state his opinion on the point of whether this proposal falls inside of the general will. Okay, this is Rousseau, you guys, Social Contract. When therefore the opinion is that it is contrary to my own, when the opinion that is contrary to my own then prevails, this proves neither more nor less that I was mistaken, or that the project was mistaken, but that the thought of the general will was not so. What he's saying, what Rousseau is saying, and by Horowitz's words, what he's confirming is that the social contract literalism gets around the questions of your rights as a minority to proceed the revolution, to do things outside of, legal encapsulation, by describing democratic process and general will as constitutive rather than performative. Hold on, just stay with me here. Right? By voting, we're not deciding to perform or deciding upon some contingency of our destiny. We are actually discovering what the democratic will is. Okay, do you see what I'm saying? We're actually discovering by voting that there's something that pre-exists the act in question. Okay, I'm going to give this to you. All right, it's a substantialization of the thing itself. What we're trying to determine by voting, by Rousseau and the social contract, the progressives, we're not trying to determine our future. We're trying to determine our destiny, what has already been preordained. All right, this is democratic will as predestination. All right, it's Calvinism. It's religion.
Cody, what if society decided that it needs checks on guns?
Well, here's the question. Can we really say that society as an organism can make a kind of coherent or comprehensible decision? I don't really believe in the fictions of social contracts. I believe that's just a kind of mythology of power. That's how we explain to ourselves the fact that we elected rulers. I mean, is there such a thing as a social decision, a political consensus? No, these are fictions. They describe what's happening. They describe how power is functioning in society. And we're trying to blunt power in some of its mechanisms.
So it's almost like you're making decisions for the society.
But maybe on a more symbolic and psychological level. You can say that. Like in the UK, they say, well, we're a gun-free society. They bear it with some pride, like it's an element of Britishness or something. And then you say, well, look, there's a gun on the internet, and you can have it if they want it. That does seem to offend some type of cultural sensibility. Yes, but the future is going to be like that for people. There aren't going to be regionalistic, nationalistic ways of making social decisions when the individual has more capacity to do what he will, enabled by network or distributed technologies.
I begin as a liberal. I discover the cypherpunks and crypto anarchy, and then by the end, I'm not even sure I'm an anarchist anymore. I feel like I'm almost just like the accidental node in something else. In my book, something deeper and not at all concerned with the affairs of men.
There's an American concept called federalism, which is the idea that distribution, smaller centers of power, lead to better outcomes, just socially speaking, not even politically speaking here. If there can be smaller petty tyrants instead of larger, fewer
so
tyrants,
tribal culture.
this is a better outcome for the common man. not tribalism directly, okay? The connotations there are a bit like jingoistic or something. But literally that, government is better at smaller municipal levels rather than a state level, better at a state level than at a federal level. Do you know what I mean?
But yeah, but Cody, wouldn't it be like going backwards to history? Because we all started as tribal societies and we've progressed into federal and feudal societies. So wouldn't it be like regressing back to the past?
Well, who's to say we haven't regressed already? I look around at the economic situation today and think to myself, isn't this kind of like Marxist feudalism or something? I mean, am I not really just a serf of some type of moneyed class? I mean, I just have better, entertainment. I can watch Game of Thrones, but am I not still dominated in some sense? But to take that joke away, and to be, I guess, a bit more serious, the idea that you're projecting is ideological, that there's a certain linear history to the progress, that history is kind of moving in stages of development. I'm seeing nothing but, from my perspective, a train in perpetual derailment, retrograde, abuses of liberties, and that there is no concept of real human rights. It's just something we use to go bomb Iraq or take over a country or assert our economic dominance. I'm seeing a slide toward barbarism, not toward civilization that you're implying. I'm doing everything I can to maintain the distance that separates us and keep our humanity as individuals. Among those things that I think is essential is maintaining the capacity for self-preservation and ideological conflict. The Liberator is, I think, a great prop in that conversation.
I claim that it doesn't matter what the origins of the Second Amendment were. With the internet, we can transform this thing into duty to resistance on a global scale. Right to resistance on a global scale, and we don't even need to use the words rights or duty. If it's simply a fact that the internet serves guns now, this is just a point of political life.
I think it's actually more practical than that. I think we have taken products like automobiles and cigarettes, we've regulated them to protect health and safety. If you look at cars and what we've done since the 1960s, Auto deaths have plummeted in this country dramatically, and that wasn't magic. That was because we regulated cars for safety. Seatbelts, safety glass, airbags. We have better highways, better lighting, driver training, laws against drinking and driving. I could go on and on and on. And as a result of those measures, looking at the problem and trying to reduce death and injury from motor vehicles, you took a holistic public health approach and attacked it from various angles. Product safety, regulation, driver education, public education. Because they know that. They know that good policy comes from data, from analysis. And in the absence of that, there's no policy.
I mean, it's like the daily serial, it's true lies of technocracy. I mean, wow, the squabbles that the administrative state has with, the left and the right argue about data collection. So I play both sides of the table on these things. Did that talk sound a lot like disciplinary capital to you talking? I mean, it's basically the concerns of the smooth function of the workforce. The nightmare scenario is that something might interrupt our productive and consumption habits. Look, what I did to also foreclose the possibility of any of this being meaningfully resolved, because look, I'm a bit spiteful. We started a thing called the Ghost Gunner Project. It's done $1 million in sales since 1 month ago. And what does it do? It's an automatic machine which automatically mills an 80% lower into 100% lower on an AR-15 semi-automatic assault rifle for you. And so, in the comfort of your own home, outside of the traditionally delineated means of commerce, those channels, those sites, those nostalgic sites of enclosure and observation that we're all squabbling about over here, I've given you the ability to produce an infinite amount of these rifles outside of the all-seeing eye of the state. You're going to have it. I'm shipping them in December. I'm shipping 500 in December. I'll ship 500 in January. I'll ship 1,000 in February. Do you understand what's happening here? This is done for free. These aren't serialized machines. This is done outside of commerce and the FFL network and any of the federally mandated statutes that are enforced by the NFA and the GCA. It is completely unarticulated, unlegislated, the free production of an assault rifle by you in the privacy of your own home. I mean, we're talking carte blanche. Understand the stakes of what's happening. You've got a whole hell of a hill to climb. And I invite you to climb.
Actually, there was a referendum in Washington State during the recent election, and the people voted directly on whether they wanted background checks, and guess what? They won.
Gun control got its ass kicked in this election, didn't it, guys? You see all those red state conservatives that took the state legislatures? Yeah, we're gonna have a whole epic of gun control real soon. Just send your money in.
Tragically, you know what might happen is there might have to be an accident with one of these 3D printed guns, a real massacre, to get people to act. So.
And then how would you feel? I'm something that you create.
That's an emotivist question. I accept those. I accept that. Do you understand that I accept that? Do you understand that? Let me teach liberals how to be good liberals. All right? You like a civil liberty? That means you believe in its protection because it has social costs, not because it's free and easy. Oh yeah, I love the First Amendment. Why does it deserve protection? Because of the terrible things that can happen. Why does the Second Amendment deserve protection? It's in the Bill of Rights. It's a structural element of the civil liberties of being a freeholder in these United States. It deserves protection because something can be done badly with it. Being serious about civil liberties means tolerating that there are social costs that come with these civil liberties. I don't even like liberal talk, but come on. I don't want to teach liberals to be good liberals. Let's keep up.
It is a politics of fear. Every one of you has seen Campaign 2012. Okay? It's a politics of fear formulated as a defense. This is general politics now. Formulated as a defense against potential victimization, harassment, and excess. These are the only uses of legislation anymore, and you'll see it. All right? Legislation to prevent you from victimization, harassment, and excess. And this excess in every sense of that word. Okay? Its object is the total technocratic administration of life, nature, the life sphere, the world, the universe. Okay? It foresees a future. Well, you can best see it with this ecological global warming narrative. Okay? There's an eschatology. Well, the end is nigh. The end is coming. Okay? What can you do? Well, you must sacrifice. You know, because you're free, you must live on one of our approved, 24 housing projects. You must recycle. I mean, it's about, because you're so free, everything is prohibited. Okay? This is the new biopolitics. Here resides the true line of separation between radical emancipatory politics and the predominant status quo politics, which is these biopolitics I just described. It's not the difference between two different positive visions. It isn't, oh, well, what do you and I have in common? What's different between us? Well, let's see. No. Radically different politics, okay?
So the Second Amendment, if we're being honest,
Yeah.
comes from this neo-Republican tradition, from a controversy in Republican politics, as a reaction to monarchy that has nothing to do with our current concerns, right?
Right.
We are decadents. We are provided for. A political economy and division of labor have seen to it that we don't really feel the need to be our own farmers, our own soldiers, and really like whole civic beings in the way Republican theory of the 18th and 19th century saw that we might be. The early Republic of America is gone, and those Republican radicals are having a conversation we don't even understand. But one of its lingering effects was written into our document, and it was that all men, all freeholders would have military-grade weapons. They would form the basis of the defensive forces of the country so that there wouldn't be a standing army or a mercenary force, and so that we would have a better moral economics, civic structure that would be less prone to a kind of corruption that could create military forces that could then overturn the country. It almost makes no sense at all anymore, and in fact, even the good Second Amendment literature calls it embarrassing or terrifying, but it's here. And almost like in the work of Agamben, almost completely unique in history, the founders wrote in a duty to resistance and a right to military-grade hardware into the founding documents. Incredible.
The most common question I get from, quote-unquote serious reporters is, are you not afraid that once this is legitimate, someone will print one out and kill you with what you've done, And they say it just like that, moralistically, all right? There's a moralism in that. It's saying, okay, well, it's also like kind of Frankenstein, modern-day Prometheus myth, like, oh my God, look at what you've created, it will destroy you. It's kind of like, oh, you can't give this knowledge to you. And of course, I was on the BBC radio, and the guy said, do you not feel like Oppenheimer? And of course, this is absurd, Oh, now I become death, the destroyer of worlds. This is so fucking absurd. This is like this hysteria. This is how deeply ingrained the anti-gun hysteria is, right? In these cultures, but still, there's a truth to it, and there's also a threat to it. It's saying you're going to be punished for what you've done. This knowledge is going to kill you. It's going to punish you. Are you prepared for that? So it's a test. It's a revolutionary test, and I realized it was the first moment of authentic revolutionary communication when I said, they say, "Are you afraid?" And I said, "No." And at that point, and every conversation is always the same. The dynamic immediately changes, and they go, "Oh." You can hear it in their voice and everything. They go, "Oh my God, he's serious. He's gonna do it. He intends to do it." It's like it's not a joke. That is what Zizek described in Robespierre as virtue terrorism. Okay, abstracted, pure principle, pure virtue, used as a kind of ultimate arm. Right, virtue terrorism. It's like hyphenated. Okay, so. There's nothing you can do about it. It's almost this Zen attitude that the samurais had in World War II, right? It's like, no, like I'm a dead man. I'm a posthumous man, as Nietzsche said. Like, it's this attitude of like, no, the revolutionary cause is the only impetus. Okay, it will be achieved. My death is simply a historical accident. When people see that you have that kind of, I guess, proto-zealotry, it's terrifying, right?
What happens if a kid is killed with a gun that you made up? This is also a responsibility, right?
I mean, so like let's say what I think is most likely that maybe a kid or like a teenager prints it out and is testing it and doesn't test it safely and injures himself or kills himself. Let's say that, right? But again, this is just an aspect of you're dealing with a device which is explosive and lethal. It can be explosive and lethal, right? There's no way of kind of permanently changing the qualities of that object or the potentials of the outcomes. I mean, that's what you're dealing with. There's no way of putting enough pads and gates and checks in between that actor and what he's doing and the kind of like the pure isolation of his experience. There's no way of stopping it. And you can't kind of come back at the creator and say, and I love this because Kalashnikov, up until his death anyway, was the same way. Blame the politicians for the wars. Blame the politicians for the terroristic acts, how they spread guns all over the earth. The United States State Department, for example, is very good at pushing Russian munitions, other munitions, under cover of other entities, into other like conflict zones. And many people die, including these children that we're talking about right now. We shouldn't necessarily blame the hobbyists, the inventors, the creators, the political activists, just for giving us just a marginal amount of access to new technologies for some kind of marginal death, when there's a grand machinery of death all around us all the time, which we're very much to blame for by supporting it with our money and our votes.